After studying this module, you shall be able to know the meaning of contract and negotiations, learn how to negotiate and contract with the supplier, identify the factors that may result into successful contract with suppliers, evaluate the consequences of taking false steps. Let's first look at the negotiation. Negotiations, it means that both parties look for positive understanding that benefits in achieving a fair and equitable deal. It is basically a formal communication where two or more people come together to seek mutual agreement about issues such as management of time, information and power between parties. It is a powerful tool for concluding suppliers agreement and build supplier relationship. The supplier selection process is based on the principles of long-term business partnership instead of focusing on short-term business imperatives that lead to cutting corners and lowering the quality of products rather than taking into account innovative capability and cost management. However, entering into a short-term contract may provide a business with flexibility in responding rapidly to changing market conditions by switching to other suppliers when needed. Let us look at the factors to be considered before negotiating with suppliers. Some of the factors are framework of the objectives, knowing the suppliers, building up negotiating blueprint, negotiating team, conduct negotiations, setting up of price and checks on suppliers. Negotiating with suppliers make them to reach mutual understanding on specific legitimate terms that enables ongoing business relationship. The basic motive behind negotiation is to handle out the problems so that a mutually satisfactory contract can be signed. Following are the practices to be followed for negotiations. Gather relevant knowledge prior to negotiation. Previous contract performance, current market price for goods and services, financial status of suppliers, efficiency and dexterity of the supplier, strength and weaknesses of supplier, know about suppliers' list prices discount rates and maintenance pricing mode, know suppliers' need. Determine specific goals and objectives. Set a range of attainable objectives that results into common objectives for both the parties, such as lowest cost of ownership, reduce or eliminate wasteful activities, integration of system and so on. Now, what are SWOT analysis? Business owner should analyze all his strength and potential to grab the opportunity, and he should also focuses on the weakness of suppliers and thus be able to prepare SWOT analysis chart. SWOT analysis help the businesses ready for counter arguments with its suppliers and differences should be admired. How to deal with negotiation strategy. Business owners strive to come up with constructive negotiation rather than competitive negotiation. This results in stable, balanced and long-term relations with the suppliers. Combative and contentious strategy, that is aggressive strategy, should be avoided as this may hamper the relationship comfort. Common objectives and mutual understanding are achievable only if suppliers are treated with generosity and civility. Now, what are the ways to achieve negotiation strategy? Ways are to be developed so as to achieve the strategy and objectives, and then these ways have to be used at the right time for better negotiation. Following are the examples of some ways the tactics to be developed. 1. Complete and detailed cost analysis. 2. Alternative actions must be prepared. 3. Scanning of environmental factors such as market structure and scenario, competition, technology, etc. Let's look at the negotiation team. It's always a better option to form a negotiation team rather than going for an individual negotiator for negotiating contract with the suppliers. The team consists of a purchaser, an engineer, and representative of operations, logistics, and marketing. The leader of the negotiation team, who actually leads the team, has to be chosen by considering certain factors such as personality, temperament, experiences, and capacity to work together with team members. Now, what are the objectives of negotiation or contract? They are to develop mutual understanding amongst the parties and minimize the uncertainty level. Also to identify any innovations or creativity required around the goods and services with the dealing parties. Also getting reasonable price. Generating secure and long-term relationship between the parties. Now, who should negotiate? Anyone in the business can be a negotiator if he or she qualifies the following. That is, must have experiences and skill in the respective area, fluent in communication through knowledge about the product or services they are dealing with, should have bargaining power, influencing logic, should be a good listener, very courteous and conclusive. Things to be negotiated by the negotiation of price. Time limit for delivering competition and duration of control. Terms of payments, warranties and guarantees, performance bonus, discount rates, travelling expenses, insurance, damages, etc. Maintenance, packaging, freight travelling and development, subcontracting, etc. Levels of services, documentation, reporting and meeting attendances. Let's look at the negotiation cycle. After considering various factors affecting the negotiation process and applying the practices relevant for better negotiation as detailed before, we can now prepare and step into the negotiation cycle, which includes 6 steps: preparing, planning, opening, examination, moving, and lastly, closing, preparation. Must know the marketplace where goods and services are being negotiated. Perceive the other party, set the targets and goal. Planning. After the first step, there is a need to determine the prospective ideal position and the degree of leverage on fallback position, and also to identify the bargaining tools. Next is to anticipate uncertain future risks and accordingly plan to develop alternative approaches to achieve business objectives and then choose the best alternative to be negotiated agreement. Third, opening. Start conversation with empathy. Use clear and open language. Bring your objectives with the base of common ground. Allow other party to speak also and observe his opinion. Fourthly, examination. Know other party's needs and wants and position him accordingly, but don't put down your own targets. Know his potential and ability to grab the market. Identify his strength and weaknesses. Fifth, moving. Persuade the other party that the current position is illogical and they need to move in order to achieve a doable solution. Try not moving further until all the methods of approach has been exhausted. Make sure that you are gaining something of equal or greater value from the other party as a privilege for moving away from your optimal position. Move further with patience, knowing your fallback position. Always check that you are moving towards the business targets. Acknowledge every privilege or concession that you get in return always. Sixthly, closing. Conclude and summarize all outcomes and ensure that the agreement has been arrived. Determine any required actions to be taken. Allotment of responsibilities. Documentation of the entire outcome for record and distribution. Designate responsibility and determine next step. There are certain mistakes which need to be avoided when approaching suppliers and vendors, etc. There is a misconception that the entrepreneur has to win every negotiation with the supplier, as the reverse may increase the cost and offerings will not be competitive. Rather, he should target to win the mentality while negotiating with the supplier. Thus, contracting with the suppliers for short duration and batter the supplier for lesser price is an inimical way to approach them and does not maintain the relationship with the supplier for long period. Following are some frequent mistakes that the entrepreneur must avoid to approach suppliers. 1. Lack of unambiguous strategy. Best way to cure this problem is by including the following. That is, identify suppliers or vendors through the internet, social media and trade shows. Examine and authenticate suppliers. Ensuring payment and govern the quality. Decide the method of sourcing that best matches with the business needs. 2. Ignorance of defined standards. It is essential to know the standards which can check out whether going for a particular source is successful. Only those suppliers will be contacted whose expectations match with the defined standards. This will save both time and cost of business and minimize the chaos that may occur in future. Following points to be considered while determining supplier standards. 1. Geographical location. Whether the supplier is located in big or smaller city or near the business area. Production capacity. Small suppliers generally don't deliver the products on time, and big suppliers usually don't pay much attention. Thus, there is a need to check out whether the supplier will be able to meet the business targets. Quality standards. Determine the quality standards that the business expect and verify these from the supplier. Price. Fix up a price margin for the product and then make out a list of suppliers to compare. List out those suppliers whose prices cross the margin. Technology and communication skills. Suppliers with sophisticated and good communication skills are always preferable. Lack of alertness on suppliers. It is the most crucial step that most companies fail to perform and end up being beguiled. Following are the points to follow strictly. Check online reviews. Review supplier websites and follow by telephone. Verify its registration and certification. Demand the supplier for its business license. Verify supplier's local registration. You may even hire a lawyer to verify its legal status. And lastly, you must visit the supplier. Lack of payment protection and quality maintenance. Payment before the delivery of goods may become a loss if the quality of delivered goods does not match with the business standards. Thus, it is better to specify the quality standards that business expects on its products to the supplier. And always demand small initial order for your samples and then move further for large purchase if satisfied from the initial samples. It is always advisable to go for written contract instead of oral contract. Written contract customarily mention parties involved, terms and conditions of contract, duration of contract, liability for breach of contract, choice of law, and lastly, attorney's fees. Let's look at the contract. Any agreement that is enforceable by law is a contract. Provisions of contract are governed by Indian Contract Act 1972. A contract is basically a document signed by two or more persons that create legal consequences and mention the financial, legal and business terms between them. Following are the situations that generate the need of a contract. 1. Labor services provided by individuals physically present in the business. Hiring or buying professional assistance like provisional hiring, consultation services, legal services, etc. Contract for leased space. Buying services which involve deliverables, material rent out and catering assistance. Essentials that need to be kept while making a contract. 1. Contract must reflect all the material facts agreed upon. 2. Receiving atonement from the supplier when warranted. Securing confidentiality. Receiving the right to use intellectual property. Receiving the right to claim for any disputes which may occur from the services. Now, there are different forms of contract between the suppliers and business owners. 1. Purchase order. It is a contract where an order has to be issued to a supplier along with the terms and conditions that govern the purchase. Master service agreements. This depicts the legal, business and material terms of the purchase of products and services with the supplier. This type of contract is created for continual purchase over a particular duration from the same supplier with the agreed terms and conditions only. This means that once goods are purchased from the supplier, no need to negotiate the legal or business terms and conditions for further purchase. However, in some rare situation, parties need to negotiate the price and other specific terms. Preferred supplier agreements. It is a contract that is similar to master service agreement, as this also specifies all material, business and legal terms of the purchases of goods and services with the supplier for continual order over a period of time. But negotiation of any terms and conditions, including the price, is not required to make further purchase. Statement of work. This contract reveals the work activities, deliverables, timelines, pricing and others of a supplier in operating his task. It does not contain all the terms and conditions of the purchase. Software license. It basically grants a right or permission to use one or more copies of software of the supplier. Let us look at the process of contract creation with the supplier. Request to the business contract office. Buying department file the request to the contract office of the business along with the details regarding supplier's full name, location, depiction of goods and services required to be purchased, sources of finance for the purchase and the details of person within the purchase department who will negotiate all the terms and conditions with the supplier or vendor regarding the purchase, and also be responsible to answer any query about the business. And it should also be accompanied with the draft if provided by the supplier. Business contract office creates contract. Representatives of the business contract office will go through the request and draft and determine whether they have mentioned all the legal and business terms, targets, objectives, timelines and others which are sensitive to the business continuity. They will forecast the risk and return that the business may face after contracting with the specified supplier. They will also ensure that the business interests are protected by the legal and financial perspective. If all goes perfect, then this moves to the next step. Business Contract Office pass the contract to the department for review. Business Contract Office will now forward the contract to the purchase department and mention any required issues to be solved or any questions or any specific risk area associated with this contract. Now, the department has to go through the whole contract passed by the office and has the responsibility to resolve all the issues mentioned in the contract by the office representatives. The department forwards the contract to the supplier for review. Now, by agreeing with the office representatives regarding the purchase, department will now forward the demand contract to the supplier for review. Supplier will go through the complete draft contract. The supplier may agree for the contract or may raise some queries or issues regarding the terms and conditions or pricing mentioned in the draft contract. Negotiating with the supplier. If the supplier has raised any queries or issues in the previous step, then it creates the need for negotiation, as discussed earlier in the module, to resolve all the issues with the supplier. Signatures. If both the parties end up with successful negotiation, then both the parties have to sign the contract. In most cases, supplier is the first to sign the contract. Let us now summarize what we have done today. 1. Negotiation means arbitration of terms and conditions of parties involved. 2. Contract means an agreement that has legal enforceability. 3. The main threshold is to convince the supplier for the business and legal terms instead of fighting to lessen the price. Business success is based on long-term relations with the supplier and not for short-term.